Are the pop-up headlights in your C4 Corvette acting up? Then stay tuned, because in this video I'll cover 5 super useful tips that I discovered when I had to make this repair. So let's clear up some confusion and shed some light on this super common issue. Welcome to Retro Cars Forever. My name is Brad, and one of my favorite features of retro cars are pop-up headlights. But pop-ups have a downside. These fun moving parts will, at some point, break down. On a C4 Corvette, this is one of the most common problems you'll encounter. In fact, it made it onto my top 5 list of most common problem areas video. So I wasn't surprised that this issue cropped up during the Radwood Car Show on my 1996 Corvette, even with only 38,000 miles on the odometer. Those telltale thunks from the driver's side told me it wouldn't be long before the light would stop moving altogether. The repair shops in my area quoted $200 to $350 to fix this issue, and that's just for one side. So I knew I could save hundreds of dollars by tackling this relatively easy job myself. Now, I did think about making a full-length video tutorial, but I realized there are already 2 excellent YouTube videos that cover this process step by step. I used both of these videos as guidance for my repair, and I'll link them in the description below. However, there were 5 extra tips I discovered that can make this job a whole lot easier. So let me share with you what I found. Tip number 1. Of the hundreds of repair products available for this job, which one should you buy? First of all, let's make sure you don't have a problem with the electric motor itself, which is this top part of the assembly here. You'll know this electric motor is working when you flip the headlight switch on or off and you see this top part spinning. If this little knob isn't twirling around, you have another issue, either with your wiring or with the electric motor itself. But assuming this knob is spinning, then you should be able to easily rebuild this bottom section here, which is where the gear housing is. I also want to note that the 1984 to 1987 model years have completely different designs compared to the later designs like mine, which I'll be mostly focusing on in this video. Just be aware that the older design tends to be harder on the gears, and the newer design tends to chew up these little bushing pellets. For each headlight of a newer C4, there are 3 small round bushing pellets that are held inside the gear. Over time, these get ground down to dust. Most of the time, on a newer C4, these bushing pellets are the only thing you'll need to replace. So when it comes to ordering parts for this rebuild, at the very least, you'll need the little bushings, which cost around $5 to $10 online. Hot tip if you don't have time to order these online, Ford window regulator gear plugs work as well and are widely available on the shelves of many auto parts stores. You can even make these bushings yourself out of a 7/16" Delrin rod from a home improvement store. However, I went ahead and sprung for this full kit from eBay for $45. While it might have been overkill, this kit had everything I would need to rebuild both headlights. That included 6 new bushings, 2 new gears, 2 packets of white lithium grease, and 2 new cork-based gaskets. Let's break that down. These thin gaskets are sandwiched between 2 pieces of plastic and are designed to keep rain and moisture out. RTV sealant can be used to fix the gaskets if they're broken, which I didn't have, so I wanted fresh gaskets standing by. The kit also included these plastic gears, 1 for each side, which the bushings fit into. And finally, you'll need fresh grease to cover the teeth on the gears. Once I dug into my motor assembly, as expected, the only parts that really needed replacing were the bushings, which were all chewed up. My old gears were still like new, and my old gaskets, that you can see here, were still usable. So you could say I wasted an extra $30 or $40 for the whole kit, but I wanted everything standing by and ready to install just in case. Plus, I like the peace of mind of having all new parts. What I do think is a waste of money, at least on these newer C4 designs, is a metal or brass gear upgrade. The original plastic gears do the job just fine, and if something went seriously wrong inside, I'd rather have to replace the cheap plastic gear than a whole motor assembly. Speaking of which, you might be tempted to replace the entire motor assembly. thinking it's an easier job than having to rebuild this gear housing. But I've talked to people who've done this repair both ways, and it turns out replacing the motor assembly is actually a harder job than simply rebuilding it. Removing the entire assembly involves some fiddly wire work that you won't have to deal with if you rebuild it like I did. And honestly, the actual rebuilding of the gear housing is the easiest part of this job. So unless you're having an issue with the electric motor not spinning like I mentioned earlier, save your money and just rebuild the gear housing. Tip number 2, even if only one headlight is causing you problems like mine was, you'll still want to fix both headlights. In my case, my passenger side headlight seemed to work just fine. Even so, I figured while I had all my tools out, that I'd go ahead and rebuild the passenger side as well. And it's a good thing I did, because here's what my passenger side bushings looked like. Just a few steps away from total breakdown. Apologies for the wallflowers and their hit 90s single, but one headlight isn't gonna be enough. Tip number 3, how to protect your paint. Every side of the headlight unit is painted, and it's very easy to chip or scratch it while doing this job. Before you begin, slide a towel or thin piece of clothing underneath this bottom gap. When you loosen the bolts that hold the headlight unit in place, it'll want to slide down and smack into that area. So this adds valuable protection. Also, place a towel on the ground before removing the headlight. Once your headlight is freed from the hood, you'll need somewhere soft to place it. Obviously, make sure your workstation has a large soft area to work on as well. I used a large towel for this. Before digging in, wipe the headlight down so any dust or dirt can't grind into the paint's surface. Detailing spray and a clean microfiber towel does the trick. And finally, cover your headlight with an old t-shirt. You'll be working with tools right next to the painted sections, so an old shirt will keep the paint protected while staying nicely in place. You can take the time to remove the painted sections of the headlight entirely, but this was a quick and easy solution that worked great. Tip number 4, the special Torx tools you'll need. You won't need too many tools to do this job, but Torx tools are required. Torx is also known as star drive, and the fiddly process of removing the motor from the headlight unit requires loosening 5 Torx bolts for each headlight. Not every amateur mechanic has Torx bits in their toolkit, so here's what I have that worked well. A T30 Torx T-handle and a T30 bit that I used with my normal socket wrench. You might be able to use different tools than what I had, but you'll need to get decent leverage on most of these bolts to pry them loose, which might be difficult with only a hand-operated Torx screwdriver. And my bit was too thick to use for the tight clearance of this little inside bolt, and that's where the T-handle came in handy. Tip number 5, how much time is needed? An expert mechanic with tools at the ready could probably do this whole job on both sides in just a few hours. But if you're an amateur mechanic like me, especially one without a handy personal garage, take your time and schedule one full workday to get both sides done right. To break that down, before you dig in, spend at least an hour watching videos like this one, and one of the step-by-step tutorials I mentioned earlier to familiarize yourself with the process. I spent another half hour sitting at my work area and getting out all my tools and materials. The first headlight took me about 2.5 hours to remove, rebuild, and replace. Keep in mind I had never done this before and I was moving at a very careful and deliberate pace. The second headlight only took me about an hour as I was now familiar with the process. By the way, if you're new to DIY car repair, I invite you to check out my top 5 car repair tips for beginners here next. Even if you've never worked on your own car before, this headlight repair is an easy job to cut your teeth on. And take it from me, it's incredibly satisfying to watch and listen to the final results. So that's my list. Leave a comment down below if this video helped you out, if you have any further questions, or if you have any useful tips that I didn't mention here. And please subscribe to Retro Cars Forever and turn on your notifications so you don't miss more retro car videos coming your way soon. Thanks for watching. See you next time.